welcome to Texas History Lessons. I am Michael, and longtime loyal listeners of Texas History Lessons might be wondering about why there hasn't been an episode in quite a long time. Now, people listening, you future people that are just finding this in the future, you won't see any lag. There'll be just the episode 120, then 121, then 122. You can just go on. But people that I have been devoted listeners and have been supportive of the show probably are wondering, well, why has it been so long since you did an episode? And those familiar with the podcast know that this is not what I do to make a living. I do this because I love history and I love sharing stuff about history and being positive about things in history and thinking about a lot of weird stuff and sharing those things too. And if you've been listening over the last couple of years, you'll have noticed that in the summertime, things do slow down. I tried to plan ahead for that. And I'm sorry that it just gets ahead of me. I can't control the time and all the work that goes on into making this. I just can't do it as efficiently as I would like to. I try to plan ahead and get ready for this busy time of year because with all the hours spent at working, cutting and baling hay and working on equipment and taking care of things and family things too, it's just really difficult to stay on top of recording. I'm always writing. I'm always thinking. I've got so much information written and notes and episodes just ready to be recorded that it's kind of overwhelming to look at what I've done. But I have a plan to get it all out eventually. Now, my friend Josh from the Wild West Extravaganza suggested that I record a bunch of episodes in batches and be ready that way. And to tell the truth, that's one of the reasons that I started down this detour of the past few episodes into the Texas Revolution. And it all ties into my master plan about where the podcast is heading. The plan was to do a few different things. I wanted to focus on just sharing primary resources like the Texas Declaration of Independence, Travis's Victory or Death Letter, accounts of the Runaway Scrape like by Creed Taylor, Jeff Parsons, DeLu Rose Harris. That is information that you might not stumble across in your daily life, but I think it's important and fascinating that you know it's out there, and that is the bare bones that historians take and try to construct history on the skeleton of the remains of these people's recollections and records. So that was what I was doing. That's what I've been doing. And it's working pretty good. And I pre-recorded several episodes. And then I did what I usually do. I got drawn into some pretty deep investigations into things like the Battle of San Jacinto. And I started looking at how history has been created over the past couple of centuries and how that story has been shared in the past to people, how the people of the 19th century looked at the events as opposed to how we look at them today. What did they think of the battleground of San Jacinto, which was just a cow pasture? Was it immediately put on a map and protected, or did that happen much later? And the fact is, it took 100 years almost before that was actually became anything close to what we have today. The Alamo went through the same thing. It wasn't automatically, people would go visit the Alamo, but it was used for many other things until people got involved wanting to protect the history of Texas. And the Alamo today exists because of people taking an interest in history and wanting to preserve actual physical sites. Also got interested in how art and poetry and literature and all of that helps shape how we look at Texas history, who we are, where we're going, and how people looked at it in the past. And, you know, I became really interested in all this, the role of art especially, and how that helps shape the myth and mystique and memory. And that resulted in the next episode that is 4 hours long, which came as the result of another one that I started before the next one that got away from me and is about the same length, about 4 hours or more. And I hope to have a visual component to it because it does focus on statues and art and literature and books and how we have created this idea of Texas history. And the good news is that I'll be releasing the episode on San Jacinto after this one. And for those people that don't like to commit to something that's 4 hours long, because to be honest, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to listen to me for 4 hours straight either. I mean, I'm glad people just like it for 30 minutes or 45 at tops. But it'll be broken down into 6 shorter parts for people who don't like to commit to such long episodes. And I'm going to do the same with the next one after that. And so in the course of researching all of these topics and just being who I am, and this is what I would be thinking about all the time anyhow, even if I didn't do the podcast. So I figured, why not share what I'm interested in? Because some people enjoy it too, you know? And so I became interested in the story of San Jacinto and the Texas Revolution. And I wanted to convey how the story of San Jacinto and the story of people involved in the Texas Revolution was shared in the past and how that became a part of popular memory over the course of so many years. And I also became particularly interested in the use of poetry to celebrate the people and events that were actual participants, particularly Sam Houston. Like, how did he go from someone being known as being a drunk, as being possibly unreliable, who possibly did not have really control over the army, and maybe he didn't make the decisions that he should have? How did he go from having a reputation like that, where people were publicly deriding him for many years, and his enemies always brought up things like this? How did he go from being that guy into one of the most beloved, if not the most beloved person in Texas history? It's an interesting story. Sam Houston helped make sure that Stephen F. Austin was remembered. Stephen F. Austin got passed over for being president. His public memory was not that strong after he died. And a lot of people were involved in making sure that he was remembered as being the father of Texas. And that's an interesting story as well. And one of the interesting finds of all this research was a poem that was written by one of Houston's biggest political opponents that was at San Jacinto and had distinguished himself on the 20th and the skirmish before, Maribel Lamar, who was a poet from Georgia. He came to Texas. He had aspirations. He had a clear drive to be a participant in leading what was going to come about after, if the war was won. And I share that poem at the end of the San Jacinto episode. So I'm not going to go through it here, but I also, in the course of my research and reading, I discovered the work of a gentleman named Alexander Dienst. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's Dienst. And he was also fascinated by something similar. And I'm going to be sharing a few poems that he discovered in the course of his research on contemporary poetry of the Texas Revolution. And the actual article that he wrote was published in volume 21, number 2 of the the Southwestern Historical Quarterly in October 1917. It's 29 pages. And Dienst was not originally from Texas, but like a lot of great Texans, he was born somewhere else and came here and became infatuated with the history and wanted to help preserve it. He was born in 1870 in St. Louis, Missouri. His father came from Germany when he was 14. He was a doctor and a dentist and had fought on the Union side in the Civil War. Alex Dienst attended Ozark College in Missouri, Ohio Wesleyan University, and the Philadelphia Dental College, and followed his father into the dental profession. And after he got his education in 1889, he came to Texas and set up shop as a dentist in Temple, Texas, where he practiced this profession of being a dentist off and on until he died in 1938. So he was present and involved in a lot of the things I was interested in this research about how like things like the Texas State Historical Association got formed, and all the different organizations and groups that were actively promoting and preserving Texas history, and the earliest professional historians that were setting up shop in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, that helped establish Texas history as a discipline. And he was enthusiastic about Texas history. He collected books, source materials, especially about the Texas Revolution. He was significantly interested in emphasizing the importance of the Texas Navy. That's something we don't really talk about. And I want to do an episode on the Texas Navy and its importance to the Texas Revolution. And he also became interested in collecting poetry that was published and written at the time of the Revolution. And there ended up being quite a bit. And he was also, as I said, participant in the Texas State Historical Association. For 20 years, he was a member of the executive council and helped shape that. And he was president of the TSHA from 1932 to 1935, just before he died. You know, and he gave a lot of free public lectures on what he called the grand theme of pioneers of Texas. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that he collected over the course of his life on Texana, which is Texas history plus more, that goes beyond just the scale and scope of documentary history. It became part of University of Texas Library. So, interesting person. And, you know, he died in Temple on May 6, 1938. But several years before, he had written this article for the Southwestern Historical Quarterly in 1917 on contemporary poetry of the Texan Revolution. And it's interesting just to see how people remember things and convey it, especially in the written word, stuff like this. There was a lot of poetry in newspapers in the 19th century. It was common to see a poem, and a lot of times it wasn't necessarily attributed to somebody, but sometimes it was. So let's take a look at an early one. And this one that is one he had found, and it's by N.T. Byers. And I think N.T. Byers is going to be Noah Turner Byers, who lived from 1808 to 1888. And he was a pioneer Baptist preacher from South Carolina. And he had come to Texas in 1835 and set up a gunsmith and blacksmith shop at Washington on the Brazos. He was involved in real estate business and had lots of things going on. And during the Texas Revolution, Sam Houston appointed him armorer and blacksmith of the Texas Army. Anyhow, so he was intimate and involved in these things. And he was a participant in different things. And he was very involved in spreading the Baptist church in the Republic of Texas. So he's an interesting person to be looked into at a later date. Anyhow, so he's the guy that I think did this first poem. And it's a short one. It's called To Arms. And you really get a sense of the flavor of the time. And, here it is. To arms. Boys, rub your steels and pick your flints. Methinks I hear some friendly hints that we from Texas shall be driven, our lands to Spanish soldiers given. To arms, to arms, to arms. Then Santa Anna shall know where all his martial law shall go. It shall not in the Sabine flow, nor line the banks of the Colorado. To arms, to arms, to arms. Instead of that, he shall take his stand beyond the banks of the Rio Grande. His martial law we will put down. We'll live at home and live in town. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And this next one is a bit longer. And it was apparently published in New Orleans newspaper. In New Orleans, people really supported and were participants in supporting the Texas Revolution. And so it's no surprise that something written, this was published in February 1st, 1836 in Louisiana Advertiser, a newspaper in New Orleans. And it is called Texas and Liberty. A brief suspense since last the muse of Texas sung in chivalry. Again the grateful task ensues to note her glorious destiny. The foes of freedom still may doubt her onward march to liberty. Her faithful soldiers, brave and stout, assurance give she must be free. A pleasing scene in Texas now dispels a momentary gloom, when first was heard the despot's vow to make its soldiers her freeman's tomb. Such boasting ends, as well it may, when men determined to be free, their rights defend and dauntless say, freedom or death our motto be. Gonzales, Goliad, Patricius record the actions of the brave, in conflict with the vile and vicious, the boasting minions of a slave. At San Antonio, Senor Cos, his safety seeks behind its walls, at length impelled with signal halt him in his strong retreat. From house to house they drive the foe, who see no chance to shun defeat. 3 days and nights in battle strife, brave Milam led till he was slain. In freedom's cause he ends his life, surviving friends the fight maintain, till San Antonio fairly won, abandoned by the conquered foe, who Texas riflemen to shun retreat within the Alamo. Last refuge of this vile crusade, whence they dispatch a flag of truce and humbly crave the victor's aid. To feed them on their homeward course, the Texans generous as brave, no longer foes that boon up supplies, their feuds now rest within the grave, and human kindness mark the wise. Ye nations old a lesson take from young defenders of their rights. No sanguinary laws they make, no lawless force their honor blights. Justice and right they will extend, but when assailed by tyrant foes, a peaceful home they will defend. All who invade they must oppose. Should lawless bands attempt again to force submission to their yoke, the gallant Texans, though humane, may then decree this truce is broke. But if they will henceforth agree in friendly intercourse to dwell, then Texas will as friendly be, in kindness none will her excel. One last resource for her remains, full independence to decree. Then in her sacrifice she gains that which if lost 'tis slavery, and who that loves sweet liberty can cease to aid its progress there? All respond, no, she must be free, Texas and liberty they cheer. And that's an interesting one. That's when it's before the Alamo fell, and it's after, and a lot of people in Texas that had participated thought that the war was done. And if they thought if Santa Anna wants to send troops again, we'll send them back home again. And there was a very obvious call at the very end to contribute to the aid and progress of the Texas independence movement if independence were to be declared. At that point in time, independence had not been declared, but that there was a push for it. And this is an example of how in the popular media that drive was there to get Texas free. And you got to wonder, was there, and there was, obviously, some people wanted Texas to be free so they could become part of the United States. And that's a long one. That's an interesting one. But that was before the Alamo and before Goliad. Now, this next one is by somebody named J. Freon. At least I think that's who wrote it according to the text here. And I don't know a lot of information about it, but this poem is called Last Call for Assistance. And it shows how things are a little bit more desperate and they need people to come to the aid of the Texas Revolution leaders in the army. And it's included in a great book that if you're interested in this kind of thing, try to track down a copy of Bolton and Barker, two early Texas historians, that put a documentary book together called With the Makers of Texas. And they quote this poem in their book. And according to Dienst, the poem was written in response to Travis's last call for assistance. And so, and like I said, I'm not sure if Jay Freon is the actual author, but it looks like that's who it's attributed to. I can't find any information about that person. But the words here show the importance of this poem and why it was shared by them in that early book. Last call for assistance. Texians, to your banner fly. Texians, now your valor try. Listen to your country's cry. Onward to the field. armed in perfect panoply, marshaled well our ranks must be, strike the blow for liberty, make the tyrant yield. Who is he that fears his power? Who is he that dreads the hour? Who is he would basely cower? Let him flee for life. Who is he that ready stands to fight for Texas and her lands? Him his country now commands, onward to the strife. Small in number is our host, but our cause is nobly just. God of battles is our trust, and the dread affray. And when the war is o'er, we'll see Texas safe and Texas free. Glorious will our triumph be on each bloody day. And that one's got a definitely different tone. And in it, there's a call to people, stand up and fight for liberty, fight the things that we all say we believe in. And you'll see in the last few episodes and in the next one, a lot of people didn't. We have this image that everybody stood up to fight. And, up until the Battle of San Jacinto, Houston was still saying we could have 4,000 people in arms from just Texas, not needing people to come from the United States to help us. If people would just stand and fight instead of running away, come to where the army is. Let's set up an actual defense. Let's do this together. And that's a curious thing to me because it makes you wonder, right? Now, the next one is called it's credited to somebody named G.V.H. Forbes. And I don't know who that is. This was written in 1836 also, but after the war, published in the Telegraph and Texas Register, August 30th, 1836. And there was a Forbes that was involved in the Texas Army, but I don't know what the relationship was, if there was, between G.V.H. Forbes and that Forbes. That Forbes ended up being involved in a lawsuit with a doctor from the Texas Army at San Jacinto who accused Forbes of some basically crimes against humanity. He accused of being some pretty awful things, and he ended up suing Dr. Labadie for libel and I think slander, and that lawsuit wasn't settled till after the Civil War. But this is the Texian war cry. Ye heirs of freedom, hear the war cry, now swelling from 10,000 tongues, in shouts betokening victory, blown o'er the world by trumpet lungs. Awake, awake, the drum is pealing on Bear's woody hills around. The tread of battle shakes the ground, and rifles' keen death shots are dealing. Hurrah, hurrah for war! The battle flag waves high. The rising of the Texian star shall light to victory. Shall sons of Washington not rely when war dogs howl on yonder plain and rapine stalks over hill and valley to bind us in oppression's chains? Shall bigot violence and plunder on Brazos's banks infuriate Rome and fill with fear each peaceful home? No, answer with the cannon's thunder, and by that blood-stained altar kneeling, the scathed and war-torn Alamo, we pledge our all of patriot feeling to hurl red vengeance on the foe. But now the tyrant's foot is crushing each gray-haired sire and blooming son who lifts in freedom cause the gun. And shall not patriots dare his rushing? Then heirs of freedom hear the war cry, now swelling from 10,000 tongues in shouts betokening victory, borne o'er the world by trumpet lungs. Awake, awake, the drum is pealing on Bear's woody hills around. The tread of battle shakes the ground, and rifles' keen death shots are dealing. This was published in August 1836. It sounds like it was written during the war as a response also to the Alamo, a war cry. And again, it's calling people to arms. And you'll see in it this image of the war dogs howl on yonder plain, and of imagery that is, very pro-war. It's glorious. Stand and be a hero like Washington. Yeah, interesting. The next one I want to share is a short one, and it is attributed to somebody called R.M. Potter. And again, I don't know for sure who this R.M. Potter was. There was a Robert Potter, who was born in 1799 and who was a signature of the Texas Declaration of Independence. And he was active at that time. He, in 1835, he'd enrolled in Thomas J. Rusk's Nacogdoches Independent Volunteers to help with the siege of Behar. And he offered his services and was involved with the Texas Navy, which is an interesting tie between Dientz's interest in the Texas Navy. So I just wonder if this R.M. Potter, I don't see a middle initial for him in his biography in the Texas State Association handbook, but it wouldn't surprise me if this poem wasn't written by him or somebody related to him. If you have any information, please let me know. It's the Hymn of the Alamo. Rise, man the wall, our clarion's blast now sounds its final reveille. This dawning morn must be the last our fated band shall ever see. To life, but not to hope, farewell. Yon trumpets clang and cannons peal and storming shout and clash of steel is ours, but not our country's knell. Welcome the Spartan death. 'Tis no despairing strife. We fall, we die, but our expiring breath is freedom's breath of life. Here on this new Thermopylae, our monument shall tower on high, and Alamo hereafter be, in bloodier fields the battle cry. Thus Travis from the rampart cried, and when his warriors saw the foe like whelming billows move below, at once each dauntless heart replied, welcome the Spartan's death. 'Tis no despairing strife. We fall, we die, but our expiring breath is freedom's breath of life. They come like autumn's leaves they fall, yet hordes on hordes they onward rush, with gory tramp they mount the wall, till numbers the defenders crush, till falls their flag when none remain. Well may the ruffians quake to tell how Travis and his 100 fell amid 1,000 foemen slain. They died the Spartan's death, but not in hopeless strife, like brothers died, and their expiring breath was freedom's breath of life. That one was published in October 1836, and in the Texas Telegraph also. And it's another one, it's an important one, and showing how so quickly a current event was turned into a work of art that helped shape our public shared memory of what happened at the Alamo. It established this image of making the Alamo a reasonable action to take, the sacrifice, the Thermopylae, dying the Spartan's death. It helps shape our way we look at ourselves in the past. And I'm going to go find a couple of more. Since the next episode is on San Jacinto, I want to close with 2 poems about San Jacinto. And the first one, it's a little bit longer. It's also from a New Orleans newspaper, written 2 days after the fight by a gentleman who was in the battle, according to Deans. I don't have a name here by who did it, but apparently somebody that was there. And again, you're going to see how immediately images from Texas history and Greek and Roman mythology are put together with Texas current events to create Texas history. And this is a good one, that really, has a lot of different elements like that. It's called San Jacinto, a parody. On San Jacinto's bloody field, our drums and trumpets loudly pealed and bade a haughty tyrant yield to Texian chivalry. Our chieftain boldly led the van, his sword grasped firmly in his hand, and bade us tell the Mexican to think of Labordia. 'Twas evening, and the orient sun into his bed was moving on, when our young heroes rushed upon the might of Mexico. Santa Anna traveled far to see what men could do who dared to be free in spite of Spanish musketry or Mexican artillery. The boldest sons of Mexico have learned to fear a freeman's blow, and dread the shout of Alamo from Sons of Liberty. 'Twas cheering to a Texian eye to see Santa Anna's legions fly from Texas's dreadful battle cry of death or victory. The carnage ceased, in triumph then proudly shone the Texian star, and vengeance on her conquering car reposed most quietly. Long shall the dark-browed maids of Spain remember San Jacinto's plain, and weep for those they ne'er again shall meet in revelry with battle's desolation. He said, "Be cautious, daring boys, the foes are twice our numbers. Remember Fannon's fate and Bowie's, perhaps an ambush slumbers." But when they thought of Travis' fate, of Fannin, King, and Crockett's, they broke all checks with scorn and hate and rushed to fight like rockets. Then Sherman raised the eagle's wings, Millard and Burleson swooped on, and Alamo was heaven ring above the prey they stooped on. In 18 minutes or less time, the foeman's works were taken, and all his dark machines of crime by flying crowds forsaken. The gallant Hockley threw the hordes of certain aiming thunder, and brave Lamar and Carnes's swords the flying cut asunder, and daring Rusk 2 laurels won amidst the foremost danger, and showed the worth of Jefferson was to his name no stranger. The Texians all, with single soul, restless rushed in battle, and crushed the foe in blood to roll, or fly like frightened cattle. 8 precious lives the Texians lost, and 17 but wounded. But of the foe 600 crossed, and by the sticks are bounded. More than 200 wounded groaned, with 700 nabbed on, and all their arms and money loaned by bigot priests were grabbed on. That's an interesting one, because how many of the names of the people? After the next episode, you'll recognize these people, and I'm going to go into greater depth in the future on some of these people, but, Fannin, but King and Crockett, of course, Millard, Burleson, if you know where the town of Burleson is, you'll know that. Hockley, Lamar, of course, Lamar, the poet president of Texas. Carnes, extremely interesting person in the Texas Revolution was Carnes. He didn't mention Deaf Smith, mentions Rusk. Rusk was there. And, interesting use of imagery and stuff. Not necessarily the greatest poem, I gotta admit, but it's interesting because it's contemporary. It's from the moment. And let's end with this last one again by J. Freon, who was, this was said to be written at Velasco, December 7th, 1836 and J. Freon here, Dienst says, was a volunteer in the Texas Army. So it's somebody that's actually involved in there, which is interesting. And this one is just simply Battle of San Jacinto as well. And they wrote, "Of San Jacinto let us sing, and of the Texian heroes that captured Mexico's proud king and all his bloody heroes. Oh, San Jacinto was the fight the Texians delight in, for there they use with all their might the power they trust their right in. Oh, Jacinto, San Jacinto, the heroes of San Jacinto, 'tis said that Houston wily chief did bait with aggravation their rage in fighting to be brief. Oh, such a fight ne'er any time nor nation has afforded, when guilt victorious for their crimes directly were rewarded. Sure, heaven was in the fiery fight, and God's indignant mercy for human nature's wounded rights led on the controversy. Now listen, all of every land, of each degree and station, though tyranny's o'erpowering hand a while may crush a nation, and triumph with a horrid din, secure in servile numbers, 'twill meet at last the might that in the arms of freemen slumbers." There's a lot to, you could really dig into these and look at the imagery and how it's trying to make relations to the ideals and ideas that help shape, as we're told, the United States and Texas as well. And, tying us to the revolution, American Revolution, liberty, and, all that stuff. Immediately, this was the imagery that was tied to the conflict. And, it's just, I hope to find more of these and, dig into, say, maybe who some of these poets were. If Freon was a volunteer, it should be able to, and I should have done this before this, but this is kind of a spur of the moment, introductory podcast to the next several episodes that are coming out. There are a lot of online resources that you can dig into and find, biographies of the people that were involved. And that's something if you want to know about, just let me know. I'll direct you to where to find that stuff.
You are listening to Texas History Lessons, a slow walk through Texas history made in Texas by a Texan for everyone, everywhere.
And yeah, I'm excited to be releasing these next episodes after this. It took a lot of work and time to get them halfway to a point where I'm happy with. I'm not completely happy, but like I said, this I'm using as a first draft to work towards something else in the future. And yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed some of this stuff. This kind of thing, everybody's not going to enjoy it, but a lot of people I think would get a kick out of some good and not so good poetry that was shared back then. And yeah, thanks again for listening. Thanks to Derek McClellan for the theme music. And we'll be back soon taking a really in-depth look at San Jacinto that I'm going to be building on in the next few years and expanding on. So thanks again. Take care of yourself. Take care of one another. Be kind. Adios.